The great space station orbited above Nexus Prime like a giant metal flower, its arms reaching out into the darkness of space. Inside its crystal halls, beings from across the galaxy gathered to make the laws that kept peace between the stars. Some walked on four legs, others floated in the air, and a few looked like giant insects with bright-colored shells. They had been meeting here for thousands of years, making rules and solving problems between their different worlds. Commander Jake Morrison sat in the back row, watching everything with quiet eyes. He wore the simple blue uniform of Earth's diplomatic service, looking plain compared to the colorful robes and metal armor worn by the alien delegates. Next to him sat Captain Lisa Parker, her hands folded in her lap, as she listened to the heated voices echoing through the chamber. At the center of the great hall stood a tall podium made of some kind of glowing stone. Behind it hung the ancient scrolls that contained all the laws of the Galactic Council. Most were written in gold ink on white paper, but one scroll was different. It was written in red ink, the color they used only for the most serious rules. The words on that red scroll were simple and clear. Never challenge the humans of Sol 3 to direct confrontation. Senator Vexstar from the Zephyrian system stood at the speaking podium, his four blue arms waving angrily in the air. His people were tall and thin, with crystal-like eyes that sparkled when they were upset, and right now those eyes were flashing like lightning. "The humans take too much," he said, his voice carrying to every corner of the vast room. "They have only one star system, just one small world where they come from. But they want mining rights in 17 different asteroid fields that belong to us. They want to dig up rocks and metals from places their ships have never even visited before they joined our council." Many of the other delegates nodded their heads in agreement. The Thraxian representative, who looked like a 6-foot-tall praying mantis with green skin, clicked his sharp mouth parts together to show he agreed. "The Softskins think they can take whatever they want," the Thraxian said. "When they first came to us 5 years ago, they seemed so polite and peaceful. They shared their medical knowledge and helped us build better computers, but now they act like they own half the galaxy." Elder Nimros of the Ethereal Collective floated above his speaking area, his see-through body glowing with soft blue light. His people were energy beings who had lived for thousands of years, and they remembered things that other species had forgotten. "The old warnings exist for good reasons," he said in a voice like wind through crystal chimes. "Our ancestors who made that rule had seen something that scared them enough to write it in red ink. They were not fools or cowards. They were wise beings who knew danger when they saw it." Ambassador Kethril from the Draconan Empire stood up. From his seat, his reptilian body covered in scales that changed color when he was excited. His people looked like dragons from human fairy tales, with long necks and sharp teeth that flashed when they talked. "Those are just old stories," he said with a laugh that sounded like rocks grinding together. "Look at these humans sitting in our gallery. Do they look dangerous to you? They are small and weak, with soft skin and no natural weapons. They have no claws, no fangs, no poison. They cannot even see in the dark or breathe underwater. Their ships are tiny compared to ours, and their weapons seem primitive." More delegates began to speak up, their voices getting louder as they worked themselves into anger. The Corvan general stood and pounded his armored fist on his speaking platform. "My people have conquered 12 star systems through superior firepower," he growled. "We have never seen anything from these humans that impresses us. Their military parades show soldiers carrying simple projectile weapons and riding in metal. Vehicles that move on wheels? How can such a backward species threaten anyone?" Captain Parker leaned close to Morrison and whispered, "Sir, they really don't understand what they're talking about, do they?" Morrison's face remained calm and blank, showing no emotion at all. He had read the secret files back on Earth, the ones that showed what humanity's military could really do when they needed to fight for real. Those files contained information about weapons and tactics that no alien government had ever seen, because humans had never needed to use them against aliens before. The Galactic Chancellor raised his webbed hand for silence. His people had evolved from sea creatures, and his skin was still damp and slippery even though he lived in the air now. When he spoke, his voice bubbled like water over rocks. "The human delegation has heard our concerns," he announced. "If they wish to keep their current agreements and continue mining in our territories, they must prove they deserve these rights. According to Section 47 of the Galactic Accords, any species can be challenged to prove their strength. Through combat trials?" The chamber fell quiet as everyone turned to look at the human section. Morrison could feel hundreds of alien eyes staring at him, waiting to see how the humans would respond to this challenge. Morrison stood up slowly, his movement causing conversations to stop throughout the enormous room. When he spoke, his voice was clear and steady, carrying easily to every corner of the assembly. "Honorable Chancellor, with great respect to this distinguished council, humanity formally accepts any and all challenges that may be presented to us. We will participate under whatever terms and conditions you consider fair and appropriate." The chamber exploded with noise as different species reacted in different ways. Some delegates cheered and clapped their hands, claws, or tentacles together, excited at the chance to put the newcomer humans in their proper place. Others looked worried and began whispering nervously to their assistants about old stories their grandparents had told them. The draconian ambassador laughed loudly, showing all his sharp teeth. "Excellent! Now we will see what these soft little creatures can really do when they face real warriors." But Elder Nimrose wrapped his energy form tighter around himself and dimmed his glow to almost nothing. His species remembered longer than most, and deep in their ancient memories were stories about a small blue world where the inhabitants had learned to fight in ways that other species could not imagine. 3 weeks passed after the meeting on the Galactic Council Station. News traveled fast through the communication networks that connected hundreds of worlds across the galaxy. Every species had heard about the challenge that was coming, and most of them were excited to see what would happen when the humans finally had to prove themselves in real combat. The Corvan hegemony was the first to step forward. Their military leaders had built an empire by conquering 12-star systems with pure firepower and superior tactics. General Thaxmar commanded their fleet from his massive flagship, a ship so large it could carry an entire city inside its metal hull. His people looked like walking suits of armor with glowing red eyes, and they had never lost a major battle in over 200 years. Admiral Steve Collins stood on the bridge of the UEF Retribution, looking out through the main viewing screen at the empty space around them. His ship appeared small and simple compared to the massive Carven vessels that floated nearby, watching everything with their powerful sensors. Collins had gray hair and wrinkles around his eyes from many years of military service, but his hands were steady and his voice was calm. The test was supposed to be simple. The Corvans had arranged 3 old ships to be used as targets in this empty star system, far away from any inhabited worlds. These were not small ships either. Each one was as big as a space station and made of thick metal that could survive hits from most weapons used by galactic military forces. Lieutenant Amy Rodriguez sat at the tactical station, her fingers moving across the control panels as she checked all the ship's systems. Her dark hair was pulled back in a tight military style, and her brown eyes focused completely on the displays in front of her. "Admiral, we have 7 Corvan dreadnoughts maintaining safe distance to observe our performance," she reported. "They have deployed sensor drones throughout the area to record everything we do during this demonstration." Collins nodded his head slowly, his weathered face showing no emotion at all. He had served in battles that never made it into the official reports sent to alien governments. He had fought in the Titan Wars when humans first learned to wage war in space, and he had been there during the asteroid belt conflicts when entire fleets had been destroyed in minutes. "What is our weapon status, Lieutenant?" he asked. Rodriguez checked her displays again before answering. "All systems are operating within normal parameters, sir. Though I should mention that we are currently running at approximately 2% of our actual combat capability for this demonstration." The bridge crew exchanged quick glances but said nothing. They all knew what their ship could really do when the safety limits were removed and the weapons were set to full power. The aliens watching them had no idea what they were about to witness. Collins turned toward the communications officer, a young man named Ensign Pete Walsh, who had joined the crew just 6 months earlier. Signal the Corvan fleet that we will begin target elimination in 30 seconds. The Corvan observers expected to see a long battle with energy beams and missile attacks, the kind of slow and methodical destruction that was typical of how most galactic species fought their wars. Their own weapons took several minutes to charge up between shots, and their tactics involved wearing down enemy defenses over many hours of constant bombardment. What happened next would be discussed and analyzed by military experts across dozens of star systems for many years to come. The Retribution's main weapon was something the humans called a kinetic accelerator, though the aliens watching had no idea what those words really meant. The device looked simple from the outside, just a long metal tube that extended from the ship's front section. But inside that tube was technology that could accelerate a small projectile to speeds that most species thought were impossible. Collins gave the order with the same calm voice he used for everything else. Fire! The weapon discharged with no visible beam or explosion, just a tiny flash of light that lasted for less than a second. The projectile was a rod of tungsten metal, no bigger around than a human arm and only about 6 feet long. It weighed less than most people, but it was moving at a significant fraction of the speed of light. When the rod struck the first target ship, physics took over in ways that the Corvan observers had never seen before. The kinetic energy of the small projectile was converted into heat and light and explosive force all at the same time. The target didn't just explode, it was completely transformed from solid matter into pure energy in less time than it takes. To blink an eye, the flash was so bright that it outshone the star at the center of the system. When the sensors finally cleared and the Corvan computers could process what had happened, all 3 target vessels had been completely vaporized. Not damaged or destroyed, but actually converted into atoms that were scattered across thousands of miles of space. The tungsten rod had passed completely through the first target and continued on to hit the second one, then the third, then several large asteroids that happened to be in its path. Each impact released the same incredible burst of energy, turning solid rock and metal into expanding clouds of superheated gas. Aboard the Corvan flagship, General Thaxmer stood in complete silence as his sensor operators reported what their instruments had recorded. His armored hands gripped the edges of his command table so tightly that the metal began to bend under the pressure. How many ships did the humans use for that attack? He asked his chief aide, a younger Corvan officer who was staring at his displays with wide eyes. Just one, General. A single vessel fired a single projectile. Thaxmer looked at the energy readings again, hoping his computers had made some kind of mistake. The weapon signature they had just recorded exceeded anything in their extensive military databases. His people had conquered 12 star systems using the most advanced weapons they could build, but what they had just witnessed operated on principles that made their own arsenal look like primitive clubs and rocks. The silence on the bridge stretched on for several minutes as the implications sank in. Finally, Thaxmer turned to his communications officer. Send an immediate message to all Corvan fleet commanders throughout our territory, he ordered. Inform them that the Corvan hegemony formally withdraws any intention of challenging the Human Federation. Make sure they understand this order comes directly from me and is not to be questioned or delayed. His aide looked confused. General, should we not study their weapon technology first? Perhaps we could learn to duplicate their capabilities? Thaxmer looked at the empty space where 3 massive ships had existed just moments before. Lieutenant, a species that can build weapons like that has probably built many other things we have never imagined. I suggest we focus on remaining on their good side? Word spread quickly through the galactic networks about what had happened to the Corvan test fleet. Instead of making other species more careful about challenging humans, the news had the opposite effect. Many alien governments decided that the Corvans must have been weak or stupid, and that their own superior technology would easily defeat these newcomers from the small blue world. The Nexari Collective was the next to step forward with confidence. Their representatives were beings of pure energy who lived inside crystal ships that sparkled like diamonds in the darkness of space. They had no physical bodies made of flesh and bone like most other species. Instead, they existed as living electricity that could move through solid matter as easily as swimming through water. Captain Ben Carter commanded the UEF Horizon, a ship that looked even smaller and more ordinary than the Retribution had been. His vessel was specifically designed for what Earth's military called exotic threat scenarios, which meant fighting enemies that normal weapons could not touch or harm. Carter was a quiet man with brown hair and steady green eyes who had spent most of his career dealing with unusual problems that regular military officers never encountered. He stood on his bridge reviewing intelligence reports about Nexari capabilities while his senior officers gathered around the main tactical display. Dr. Rachel Ford was the ship's specialist in alien biology, though her job was much harder when dealing with species that had no biology in the traditional sense. She was a tall woman with blonde hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, and her voice was serious as she explained what they were facing. The Nexari are essentially living electromagnetic phenomena, she said while pointing to diagrams on the display screen. They exist as organized energy patterns that can maintain consciousness and directed thought. Traditional projectile weapons and energy beams pass right through them without causing any damage at all. Most species that have fought the Nexari have been forced to surrender when their ships became completely inoperable. Carter nodded thoughtfully as he studied the data. The Nexari had a long history of victories against conventional military forces. They would phase through the hulls of enemy ships like ghosts, then disrupt electronic systems and life support equipment until their opponents had no choice but to give up. "What is the status of our special equipment, Mr. Chun?" Carter asked the chief. Engineer Kevin Chun looked up from his diagnostic panel with a slight smile on his face. He was a short man with black hair and quick hands who had helped design most of the unusual devices installed on their ship. "The electromagnetic pulse generators are fully operational and ready for deployment, sir. We also have the new quantum displacement field systems online and tested in case things get particularly interesting during this engagement." The Nexari war fleet materialized around the horizon without any warning, their crystal ships appearing like ghost images against the background of distant stars. The lead vessel opened communications immediately, but instead of using radio waves or other normal methods, their message appeared directly inside the minds of every human crew member. "Primitive flesh beings, surrender your vessel immediately and accept defeat. Your crude technology built from dead metal and simple circuits cannot possibly harm energy beings such as ourselves. We offer you the chance to yield with honor before we demonstrate our superiority." Carter responded using conventional communication channels, his voice calm and professional. "This is Captain Carter of the United Earth Federation ship Horizon. We respectfully decline your suggestion and look forward to demonstrating some basic principles of human engineering." The Nexari attack began exactly as Dr. Ford had predicted it would. Energy beings started phasing through the horizon's outer hull like walking through fog, moving directly toward the ship's critical systems with the intention of shutting down power generation and life support equipment. What they discovered inside the human vessel was completely different from anything they had encountered before. Every important system aboard the Horizon was protected by quantum-locked containment fields, a technology that humanity had developed after their first encounters with similar energy-based phenomena in the outer regions of their own solar system. The Nexari found themselves unable to interact with any vital ship functions. When they tried to disrupt the main computer systems, their energy forms simply passed through the quantum barriers without making any contact. When they attempted to overload the power generators, the containment fields redirected their energy harmlessly into storage batteries. For the first time in their long history of conquest, the Nexari discovered what it felt like to be completely helpless against an enemy they could not touch or affect. Carter watched the tactical displays as his sensors tracked dozens of confused energy beings moving frantically through his ships, corridors, and equipment spaces. They were trying everything they could think of, but none of their traditional tactics were working. "Sir, the Nexari seem to be getting more agitated," reported Lieutenant Commander Susan Blake from the sensor station. "They are increasing their energy output and attempting to coordinate group attacks on our systems." "Very good," Carter replied. "Now, let us show them something they have probably never experienced before. Activate the electromagnetic pulse generators." What happened next was something the Nexari had never imagined was possible. The wave of precisely tuned electromagnetic energy that erupted from the horizon did not just disrupt their energy forms. It forced them into coherent patterns that could be affected by normal matter and conventional weapons. The Nexari suddenly found themselves with something they had never possessed before: vulnerability. Their energy beings were still conscious and able to think, but now they could be hurt and damaged by physical attacks. "All weapon systems, commence firing," Carter ordered in the same calm voice he had used for everything else. The Horizon's weapons were not the massive kinetic accelerators that had impressed the Corvins. Instead, the ship carried dozens of smaller systems designed specifically for close-range combat against multiple targets. Particle beam projectors, plasma cannons, and guided missile launchers all opened fire at the same time. The engagement lasted exactly 47 seconds from the moment the first shot was fired. When the battle ended, the Nexari fleet no longer existed. Their crystal ships had been shattered into millions of glittering fragments, and their energy beings had been dispersed beyond any possibility of recovery or reconstitution. Carter stood quietly on his bridge, watching as the debris from 12 Nexari vessels drifted slowly away from his ship. His crew worked efficiently at their stations, checking systems and recording data from the encounter. "Sir, we are receiving emergency communications from several other alien fleets in this sector," reported the communications officer. "It seems word of this engagement is spreading very quickly through their networks. What kind of messages are we getting?" Carter asked. "Mostly requests for immediate non-aggression treaties, sir. Also quite a few inquiries about whether we would be interested in forming defensive alliances against mutual enemies." Carter allowed himself a small smile. "Send standard diplomatic responses to all requests. Inform them that humanity remains committed to peaceful cooperation with all species who respect our territorial boundaries and treaty obligations." As the Horizon prepared to return to human space, similar messages were being transmitted across hundreds of star systems. The Nexari had been considered undefeatable by conventional means for centuries, their energy-based nature providing immunity to virtually all known weapons and tactics. Now they were gone, destroyed by humans who had prepared for threats that most other species could not even imagine. The destruction of the Nexari war fleet sent shock waves through the Galactic Council that went far beyond simple military concern. News of the battle spread faster than light through quantum communication networks, reaching every major civilization within days. The Nexari had been feared across the galaxy for over 1,000 years, their energy-based nature making them nearly invincible against conventional weapons. Ambassador Helen Price sat in the secure communication chamber deep inside the human embassy on Nexus Prime. The room was small and simple, with plain metal walls and basic furniture that looked modest compared to the elaborate decorations favored by other species. Encrypted messages from Earth Command were flooding in faster than her staff could process them. Price was a woman in her 50s with gray streaks in her brown hair and worry lines around her blue eyes. She had spent 20 years in diplomatic service, but nothing in her training had prepared her for the situation developing around her. "Ma'am, we are receiving requests for emergency council sessions from 17 different species," reported her aide, Lieutenant Paul Martinez. He was a young man with dark hair who had joined the embassy staff just 6 months earlier, and his voice showed the stress of trying to keep up with rapidly changing events. "What kinds of requests are we getting?" Price asked while reviewing the latest intelligence reports from Earth. "The Draconian Empire is demanding immediate military intervention against humanity," Martinez replied, reading from his datapad. "They claim we represent a clear and present danger to galactic security." However, at least 6 other species are requesting formal alliance treaties with us, and 3 more are asking for protection agreements. Price rubbed her temples, feeling the weight of decisions that could affect billions of lives across hundreds of worlds. The situation was escalating beyond anything the diplomatic corps had anticipated when they first joined the galactic community. What is Earth Command's official position on all of this? She asked. Martinez checked his secure messages before answering. Fleet Admiral Johnson's response is quite clear, ma'am. Humanity will continue to honor all existing treaties and diplomatic agreements, but we will not back down from any challenges that are formally presented to us under galactic law. The emergency session of the Galactic Council convened 3 days later, with tensions running higher than anyone could remember in centuries. The ancient chamber buzzed with nervous energy as representatives from across the galaxy gathered to address what many were calling the human question. Species that had not spoken to each other in decades were suddenly holding urgent private meetings in the corridors outside the main assembly hall. Military advisors who normally stayed on their home worlds had traveled to Nexus Prime to observe the proceedings. Even the oldest and most respected elders were attending in person rather than sending junior delegates, Chancellor Mordain called the session to order, his aquatic features showing obvious signs of stress that transcended species boundaries. His people had evolved from ocean dwellers, and when they were nervous, their skin changed color and became more translucent. This assembly will hear testimony regarding recent military actions involving the Human Federation and their implications. For galactic security, he announced in his bubbling voice. The draconian representative, General Scarthex, rose from his position with the predatory grace that characterized his reptilian species. His scaled hide bore ritual scars from dozens of military campaigns, and his yellow eyes glowed with barely controlled aggression. Honored colleagues, he began, his voice carrying easily through the vast chamber, the humans have demonstrated military capabilities that threaten the balance of power we have maintained for millennia. Their weapons operate on scientific principles that are unknown to our researchers, and their tactical approach suggests extensive combat experience that contradicts their peaceful public image. Murmurs of agreement rippled through sections of the assembly dominated by militaristic species. The Corvan delegation sat in uncomfortable silence. Still processing their recent humiliation, Ambassador Price stood to respond, her human frame appearing small and fragile among the towering alien delegates. When she spoke, however, her voice carried a confidence that made several representatives shift nervously in their seats. General Scarthex, humanity has responded to exactly 2 formal challenges since joining this council 5 years ago. In both cases, we acted strictly within established protocols and used the minimum force necessary to achieve decisive victory. If our capabilities seem surprising, it is only because we have chosen to share our defensive technologies and medical advances rather than our offensive systems. The ethereal collective's representative, Elder Thyros, floated forward with obvious agitation, his energy form flickering with colors that indicated deep concern among his people. Ambassador Price, our scientific analysis suggests that your species possesses military capabilities far exceeding what any civilization should develop through natural evolution. Such overwhelming power inevitably leads to conquest and domination of weaker species. Price's expression remained diplomatically neutral, but those familiar with human body language might have noticed the slight tightening around her eyes that indicated controlled anger. Elder Thyros, humanity achieved practical spaceflight technology while simultaneously engaged in global warfare among our own people. We learned to reach the stars while we were still learning how to destroy entire continents with nuclear weapons. The fact that we chose cooperation over conquest when we encountered other intelligent species should be seen as evidence of our peaceful intentions, not as a reason for suspicion. The session continued for hours, with debate ranging from calls for preemptive military action against humanity to proposals for immediate unconditional surrender. What became increasingly clear as the discussions progressed was that the galaxy's established powers were facing something they had never encountered before: Most species had developed their military technology through gradual evolution over thousands of years of peaceful expansion. Their weapons and tactics were designed for ceremonial combat and territorial disputes, not for the kind of total warfare that had shaped human development, the Zephyrian senator who had originally challenged humanity's mining rights now sat quietly in his delegation's section, his forearms folded tightly against his chest. The confident arrogance he had displayed weeks earlier had been replaced by nervous glances toward the human embassy section. As the debate wore on, it became obvious that the galaxy was dividing into three distinct groups. The first consisted of aggressive species like the Draconians who wanted to organize a preemptive strike against humanity before human military power could grow even stronger. The second group included cautious civilizations that preferred to offer alliance treaties and hope for the best. The third group was made up of species that simply wanted to stay as far away from humans as possible. What none of them realized was that they were debating the fate of a species that had already considered all of these possibilities and prepared appropriate responses for each one. Deep in the classified files of Earth Command were detailed plans for every conceivable scenario. From peaceful coexistence to galaxy-wide warfare, the humans had learned long ago that the best way to keep peace was to be ready for war. The final challenge came from the most dangerous species in the galaxy, being so feared that even the mighty Draconian Empire refused to fight them directly. The Void Hunters were a nomadic civilization that had terrorized the outer rim of galactic space for over 800 years. Unlike other species that fought for territory or resources, the Void Hunters killed for pure entertainment. They appeared without warning in the Kepler system, 300 ships of various sizes arranged in hunting formations that had proven deadly against countless other civilizations. Their vessels were built for speed and overwhelming firepower, designed to chase down fleeing enemies and destroy them slowly for maximum amusement. Admiral Kate Sullivan commanded the largest human fleet ever assembled for galactic operations. 12 ships floated in formation near the edge of the system, appearing modest and unremarkable compared to the massive alien armada approaching them. Sullivan was a stern woman with short black hair and cold blue eyes who had earned her rank through decades of combat experience in the outer colonies. Unlike the previous encounters, which had been formal duels with specific rules and limitations, this engagement would be conducted under what the Void Hunters called natural law. No restrictions, no mercy, and no survivors among the losing side. The aliens had made it clear that they intended to hunt down and kill every human in the fleet, then broadcast the recordings across the galaxy as a warning to other species. Commander Ryan Brooks sat at the communications station, his hands steady on the controls despite the magnitude of what they were facing. He was a veteran officer who had served with Sullivan for 15 years, and his voice remained calm as he reported the incoming transmission. "Admiral, we are receiving their standard challenge broadcast," he said. "They are demanding immediate surrender and offering to make our deaths quick if we cooperate." Sullivan nodded grimly, her weathered face showing no fear at all. She had read the classified reports about what happened to species that encountered the Void Hunters. Entire civilizations had been wiped out by these predators, their worlds left empty and lifeless after the hunting fleets moved on to new prey. "All ships, this is Admiral Sullivan," she announced over the fleet communication network. "Today we demonstrate why our ancestors wrote certain rules into galactic law. All vessels will execute Battle Plan Omega on my command." What followed was not a battle in any conventional sense, but rather a systematic demonstration of military capabilities that humanity had spent centuries developing through bitter experience. The human fleet deployed weapons and tactics that operated on principles the galaxy's other species had never imagined possible. The first surprise came when the Void Hunter fleet tried to use their superior speed to surround the human ships. The aliens discovered that their targets were no longer where their sensors indicated they should be. Quantum displacement generators allowed the human vessels to exist in multiple locations simultaneously, making them impossible to target with conventional weapons. The Void Hunters responded by firing everything they had at the apparent positions of the human ships. Massive energy beams and guided missiles filled the space between the two fleets, creating a light show that could be seen from several star systems away. When the weapons reached their targets, they passed harmlessly through empty space where the human ships appeared to be. Then the humans began their counterattack. Quantum torpedoes materialized inside the hulls of Void Hunter ships without warning, existing in multiple dimensions simultaneously and making them impossible to intercept or deflect. Each torpedo carried enough antimatter to vaporize a small moon, and they detonated with precision timing to maximize the destruction of enemy vessels. Gravity manipulation systems created localized distortions in space-time that crushed entire squadrons of alien ships into impossibly dense points of matter. Some Void Hunter vessels found themselves caught in reverse time fields that aged their hulls into dust in seconds, while others were stretched across impossible distances by tidal forces that no living thing could survive. The human energy shields did not just absorb incoming attacks like conventional defensive systems. Instead, they converted enemy fire into ammunition for counterstrikes, turning the Void Hunters' own weapons against them with multiplied force and devastating accuracy. Captain Jennifer Walsh commanded the UEF Devastator, one of the smaller ships in the human formation. Her vessel carried experimental weapons that had never been tested in actual combat, devices so powerful that using them required special authorization from Earth Command itself. Admiral, requesting permission to deploy the Singularity Cannon. She transmitted over the secure command channel. Sullivan checked the tactical display, showing the positions of all enemy vessels before responding. Permission granted, Captain Walsh. Show them what happens when they threaten humanity. The Singularity Cannon created a miniature black hole that existed for exactly 0.3 seconds before collapsing back into normal space. During that brief time, it consumed everything within a sphere 50 miles in diameter, converting matter into pure energy that was then directed outward in a controlled explosion. 60 Void Hunter ships simply ceased to exist, not destroyed or damaged, but actually removed from reality itself. The remaining alien vessels found themselves facing weapons that violated their basic understanding of physics and tactics that made no sense according to their military experience. Within 2 hours, the Void Hunter fleet had been completely eliminated. 300 ships that had terrorized the galaxy for centuries were reduced to scattered atoms drifting through empty space. Human casualties numbered exactly 0. The aftermath of the engagement was broadcast live to the Galactic Council, where representatives watched in stunned silence as Admiral Sullivan delivered humanity's final message to the galaxy. For many centuries, your predecessors maintained one simple rule written in red ink on your most sacred scrolls, she said, her image appearing on screens throughout the council chamber. Never challenge humans to direct confrontation. This rule was not created out of fear or primitive superstition, but from hard-earned wisdom purchased with blood and suffering. Sullivan paused, allowing her words to reach every corner of the vast assembly before continuing. Humanity evolved on. A world that tried to kill us every single day for millions of years. We learned to fight by fighting for our very survival against predators, natural disasters, diseases, and each other. When we finally reached the stars, we brought that experience with us along with weapons and tactics developed through absolute necessity. The transmission showed the debris field where the Void Hunter fleet had existed just hours earlier, 300 vessels reduced to subatomic particles in less time than most species needed to charge their primary weapons. We joined your galactic community seeking peaceful cooperation and mutual benefit. We shared our medical knowledge and defensive technologies freely with all species. We followed your protocols, respected your customs, and honored your treaties. But when you chose to test our resolve, we responded with the same dedication to total victory that carried our species from primitive caves to starships capable of crossing the galaxy. Admiral Sullivan's final words echoed through the silent chamber with the weight of absolute truth. The ancient rule existed to protect you, not us. We strongly suggest that you remember this lesson. In the weeks that followed, the Galactic Council quietly restored all of humanity's territorial claims and expanded their representation within the governing body. The rule against challenging humans was not only reinstated but elevated to the level of constitutional law, with violations carrying penalties severe enough to deter even the most aggressive species, and in the classified archives of dozens of different civilizations, new files were created containing a simple warning for future generations. There was only one rule that truly mattered in galactic politics, and the galaxy had ignored it once. That was enough.